now look at the second item on the agenda, and that is to look at a summary of infrastructure criteria that have been announced by the government. You may be aware that this arose first from the Minister of Finance, Grant Robertson, who said we'll be looking at some projects in construction that will get the construction sector back to work quite quickly and have a pipeline of activities to give confidence to that area, will provide a stimulus for the economy, will be a job creator. And I think 2 days ago we had a press statement from Phil Twyford and Shane Jones, and yesterday we actually got the specific criteria of what they were looking for from local councils and also from the private sector. They also gave us a timeline. The good news is that, as I said before, when I was asked, I think by staff, do you have any projects that you could help the government with? Yes, we're here from local government and we're ready to help. The criteria, however, is somewhat narrower and the timeline is steeper than what we may have anticipated. So it's important to bring to you today a report from our council officers as to what we're looking for. The minister, and I rang the minister straight after the announcement, said, look, they'll be looking short term, intermediate term and long term, but for the purposes of this exercise, we're looking at the short term. And it basically, we have to have it's a 14 questionnaire on each project back to the government by the 14th, which is less than a fortnight away. I know that both ward councillors and local boards will want to have an impact into this area, to have an input into it and an impact. And what we'll be doing from the discussion I've had with officers, we'll need to get that very, very quickly. Perhaps we'll send out to you the questions that they need answered on any particular area where we might be seeking infrastructure investment. So the criteria we're looking at are the government criteria, the government requirements of that it'll be job creating, that it'll have a multiplier effect, that it will free up private investment. And I think from our perspective, we'll be looking at a range of projects. We won't be successful on all of them, but let's put up as many as our officers have time to complete, and that will be the critical question. But we'll be looking at regional equity. We'll look at projects meeting wider objectives, and we'll be looking at projects that the staff can do the required work on, which is kind of what needs to be done. Is it ready? Can it get off the ground within 6 months? And can we indicate what the risks are, where we are on the consenting process, etc. So it may well be cases where we've already applied for consent, but because of the current economic framework, we're now worried about whether our revenue will be there to put in our share of the cost of those infrastructure projects. So what I want, officers have been working for quite a while on this. I've got, I've got Stephen Town as our CEO that may wish to comment on this, Barry Potter and Megan Tyler and John Dunshay, I think, are the key officers that have been working on it. Have I covered everybody there, Stephen? And I'm not quite sure. I think it's Barry that will lead on this. So I'll get Barry to give an outline, and then we'll go through the process of questions and comments. But the emphasis is we've got a very short time frame, quite specific criteria. What projects have we got that we can pull together and answer the questions that the government wants within less than 2 weeks? That's really tight. Barry, if I can invite you to address the challenge ahead of us, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me there?
I can hear loud and clear. I think members can hear okay.
Okay, Your Worship. So just 3 things I'll cover briefly, and then we can take a background to it. We'll talk about a little bit more about the criteria, and then just the process we have to work to from here. So background of this is, well, yesterday officers received the detailed information from Crown Infrastructure Partners. So we've only just had this very recently. Crown Infrastructure Partners They're assisting the Industry Reference Group, which is chaired by Mark Binns, to advise the government and ministers on issues affecting the construction industry as a result of COVID-19. The ministers would like to understand the availability of shovel-ready projects. The information will be used to form any potential response required to provide certainty on a pipeline to be commenced or recommenced to the construction industry once the response level has got to a point that is suitable for work to start. Criteria have been established, and I'll spend a little bit of time and those criteria will be what the group uses to assess which projects might go forward. The key focuses on projects that are already in construction but have stopped, or projects that are close to being ready for construction, and only those projects that meet those criteria will be forwarded to the ministers by that group. The work that staff have been doing, and we've just been working on this for a while, staff have been using the work they've already been doing in the infrastructure space over recent years as a basis for proposals that might go forward. Those things we've been working on, of course, include the Auckland Transport Alignment Program, a Crown Council Joint Work Program, Housing Program, Kaingaroa's Work Program, Structure Planning and Spatial Priorities, City Centre Developments, Panuku Work Program, Asset Management Plans for Stormwater, Water, Wastewater, Community Facilities and Community Services, and Auckland Transport's Work Program. So we've only just begun this work. We don't have any proposed lists for councillors and members to comment on at this stage. You'll understand it's just been announced and the timeframes are incredibly tight. However, we would appreciate any comments or thoughts that you would have on what final projects could be included, and we will need that feedback by Monday morning at 9 o'clock, the 6th of April. We have to have our response into Crown Infrastructure Partners by 14th of April, and our intention is to come back to the Emergency Committee on next Thursday, so that we can get some guidance from you about these projects. So the criteria, there are 4 criteria that they will be assessed against. Criteria 1 is the extent to which the project is construction ready now, or will be ready realistically within 6 to 12 months. So that construction readiness is really important. Criteria 2, the project is of an infrastructure nature. It's either horizontal or vertical, so it can be civil or buildings. And the project is public or brings public or regional benefit. Criteria 3 is around the size of the project or program of works. So it's important to understand that that size has to have material employment benefits, and they have a threshold of $10 million above. And criteria 4 is an assessment of the overall benefits and the risks of the project. And that includes an assessment of what the COVID-19 risk might be to that project. As you mentioned, Your Worship, there is a very detailed form that is for each project and will take some time to work. So important things to keep in mind in this process, given the projects have to be shovel ready, opportunity to go out and create new projects or to put forward projects that are not already well progressed in their planning. So from this group or to this group, an email will come out today to you giving a summary of what's required, and just to reinforce that message that we'll need a response back from you on projects by 9 a.m. on Monday, and to the next governing body meeting.
Thank you very much, Barry. Are there any other officers that want to report on this, or have you've covered it off for everybody, Barry?
I think we've covered it off.
Okay, that's great. So that gives you a clear idea of the time frame. I'm sorry, councillors, I'd hope we'd have longer than that, but by Monday morning we'd need any ideas, and you've got probably, I think, Barry, we might think of putting out the questions that have to be answered to councillors, so they can have a bit of a crack at that locally to see whether we have the answers and whether we meet the criteria. That would help councillors. You've got an idea of the criteria that's been spelt out. What we need to do is to indicate that we are able to assist the government in this, and we can get things off the ground really quickly. There are wider projects that I thought might have been eligible, but the focus for this immediate package is not even the intermediate or long term, it's the short term. So that has narrowed the range of things that we may usefully be able to have put forward, but we'll be looking presumably to Auckland Transport, to Watercare, to Healthy Waters, to Panuku and anybody else that can come up with ideas. But if you as ward councillors, and hopefully we'll get these out to our local board chairs as well, have ideas that we think we can put together in that time frame that would meet those criteria, put them forward. The big challenge for our team will be they can't process 100 ideas. They can only process probably, maybe a dozen ideas. Too many. I'm getting the shake of the head there. Maybe half a dozen ideas overall. So look, we'll run through it by way of questions again, and I'll start at the top of the list. Questions, and please keep them to one question. Councillor Bartley.
No question from me, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Casey. I can't hear anything there. Councillor Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Barry. Interesting initiative, tight timeframes. What's the ability that we're going to have, say, to bundle facilities programs up, so things like upgrades or repaints or refurbishments of community facilities, sports fields, parks, etc., into one package that fits the criteria?
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, yes, we have the opportunity there. There is the ability to put together a program of works. They are looking for that threshold of $10 million.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
No questions from me, thanks, Mayor. Just look forward to receiving the outline that Barry covered off in his report, just to start getting our heads around it, because we've had already initial discussions with a couple of local boards.
Great, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll be looking at whatever list can be put together by this time next week at the emergency meeting, so that's why the time frame is as tight as it is. Councillor Coombe. Councillor Cooper.
You.
Oh, Councillor Coombe, sorry.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. I do just look forward to getting the memo as well, and of course wanting to look at our list through a climate positive lens, and I hope that even though that government hasn't put that in their criteria, that we will absolutely set a higher bar for our own criteria of what we put forward. But I look forward to just being able to contribute once by Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it's important that the projects we put forward meet our own economic, social and environmental criteria as well as the government's. If we can do those things, that obviously improves the chances of success. So we'll do some hard thinking on that. Councillor Cooper?
All right, Councillor Henderson and I are already onto this, so we'll have our thoughts next week on the deadline. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm expecting some proposals on the northwestern motorway and maybe the shoulder project that hopefully could come into that criteria. Councillor Dalton.
No questions.
Thank you. Councillor Darby.
Yes, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Barry. Look, I noticed quite telling comments in the Bins letter that maybe others haven't seen. It's a great line. No half-baked and no bridges to nowhere projects. So that goes back to what Councillor Coombe has just raised, actually. If we don't put a climate lens through this, it is a half-baked bridge to nowhere project. So question to you, Barry, even though we've got government's criteria, can we overlay that with our criteria? Because I think we need to look at leveraging multiple benefits here. So Councillor Coomer's raised one. If we look at the transport space, we need to look at mode shift, better transport choices. We need to look at road safety. We need to look at how it fits for the future. And the future has just dramatically changed. So a lot of projects may not be relevant anymore to the future, which we're only just finding out about. So my question to you, Barry, is when you send your memo out, can you identify what the government criteria is, but also very carefully outline what the Auckland Council criteria would be?
Yes, we can do that. We can put over whatever criteria we might want to include over it. We will need to be aware of the time frame that we have to establish what those criteria are, but we can give some guidance on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. What I should note is that in addition to the usual projects that we think of in regard to infrastructure of transport and water and environment, there'll be some other projects that will be coming forward affecting the Auckland region. I imagine that might be in the area of health and education. Now we won't be making recommendations or putting forward projects in those areas, but those are areas that are also legitimate areas to consider in terms of infrastructure for our city. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to comment, just a little one around what you've just said. I think with the projects moving forward, there may be some that has an impact on the health and everything else of our community, so they should be considered as well. Barry, can you assure me that the directors who are looking after, for example, the PACE committee, they will be advised or consulted in regards to this?
Do you want to respond, Megan?
Kia ora, thank you, Alf. It's Megan here. Look, as you know, this is really quick. So what we'll do is we'll put an email out to all elected members today, asking for feedback. Next week, we will need to work out how we frame those up and then put them into the system for the committee. So could I...
Okay, I'm not sure whether we lost volume during the last part of that, but did you hear the answer, Alf?
Yeah, it was just a little part around. Hopefully, Megan is saying equity is going to be one of the key criteria for us, along with what others have said, Your Worship.
Yeah, I think equity is important, and regional equity, both of those things. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add my weight to the comments made by Councillor Cashmore that you can bundle up some of those sports fields upgrades and so forth in hopefully a package. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Hanare?
No questions, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and might I say, very perceptive call about the Northwest. I think we might have a few ideas.
I think I can anticipate those.
I do have another question, actually. So when we're talking about projects, just to be clear, are we talking about proposing one specific project per thing, or can it apply to a range of projects? For example, greenways plans, those kind of things.
The focus is very clearly on infrastructure and putting forward projects. Their prime driver here is how to get a workforce back onto tools and working quickly. So we can bundle up projects with whatever range we want. At this stage, Crown's overlying goal here is to get infrastructure projects up and running because of the people they employ.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you. First, just a comment. I'm a bit concerned about the panel. I don't know if we can give feedback on that. That's basically 4 people from a certain demographic, no women, no Māori, no Pacific. I have a concern that the decisions about what projects are going to be chosen come from one sector of society. So just keep that in mind. How do we give feedback to ensure that they're looking broadly for the future of all our communities, but they're, in the end, the final decision is going to be made by this panel, which is not even, as far as I can see by the names, slightly diverse. So that's just a concern that maybe we should be putting forward. The other thing, following up others around climate change and future proofing, how intensely are we putting a look at that? The other things are how, the bundling is good, but also what are other things that we could be doing, like choosing things that are wrong. So like Councillor Darby said, we may not have immigration for 2 years. We are not going to have housing growth. We are probably not going to have greenfield growth for a long time. The overseas investment, things like this. How can we ensure that these projects are doing the best for us right now, but also into the future? How broadly are we really thinking? And the other thing around shovel ready, we're going to need to engage as many jobs, including those designers, architects, all that sort of thing. Does shovel ready mean that we have a complete design and it's ready to go, or does that mean that we could engage some creatives and designers and all that in the next 6 months to draw up, design, plan things, which would also, that's a whole lot of highly paid, good creative jobs as well. And the creative sector is being smashed at the moment. So I just want to make sure that we're not going shovel ready means that it needs to, because not everything is going to start bang on the 6 months. That just is not how the line works. So those are a lot of questions, but I'm just quite confused and concerned that we're going to rush to bad decisions.
Yeah, shovel ready I take to mean that the construction, because this is around a construction package, but design and engineering work is part of that, but I take it to mean that you could actually start to begin construction within 6 months. That's what they've largely used, but somewhere else they've got 6 to 12 months. So I think there's a little bit of flexibility around it. Take on board that the world is going to look different, the comments that yourself and Councillor Darby have made. But we shouldn't imagine that because there might not be any the level of growth we had before, that we still don't have a shortfall in our housing stock, which has been estimated around about 30 or 40,000. So I wouldn't be going out to say, look, immigration slowed right down, therefore we don't need any housing. I think we need to keep that section of the construction industry.
I said greenfield housing, not necessarily all housing.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, we're looking both ways on that one. Anyway, Councillor Mulholland.
Kia, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity. My question is for Barry Potter. Barry, is there an opportunity with this to have a discussion with yourself and Panuku around a combined public and private housing development, one that also relates to utilising a TOD, so in terms of advocacy for those types of projects, and I'm also interested in equity, of course, but I do support the projects in principle, except for a couple that have been raised. I'm especially supportive of stormwater and water management, but I'm interested in the answer on that public-private housing, where it includes a council environment, a council space. Kia ora.
Yes, Councillor Mulholland, it certainly can be that. The thing we need to be mindful of here is that these are projects looking to be at least well developed in their thinking and planning, and they're pretty much ready to go.
Kia ora, thank you. Yes, I am aware of that, and I'm also aware of the, I've got 3 pages of notes that I've taken since you've been talking on the subject matter. May I have the opportunity to speak with you with regards to a couple of ideas of projects that I believe are going to go into consenting very soon in the area, which would support that housing and public space need. Thank you.
Definitely, yes.
Yep, we'll get you two to do that offline. Councillor Newman.
Oh, yep. You there?
Yep, we can hear you, Daniel.
Yeah. Look,
comment and then a question from me. I think the key thing here is to push the projects that are going to keep New Zealanders in paid employment. I mean, you know, we're all getting paid our six-figure salaries. So for me, the objective is the transport infrastructure projects, the other enabling works that enable New Zealanders to be paid. And Councillor Dalton and I are coming up with our list, and I think that the bundling option is a good one. Barry, and I've asked my CSA this morning, but can we can you really encourage Auckland Transport and Watercare and Healthy Waters to make available information about their forward renewals program? And I know that their renewals program has been designed, I guess, to sort of like cut their cloth with the budget that they're going to get, or that they assume they're going to get. But I'd actually like to see what that renewals program would look like if it was significantly supersized, if we were able to bring forward a lot of those renewals projects that don't need to be consented, don't need to be business case, but actually ready to go if we had the funding to do that work. And but can you really lean on them to try, and I know that they're all working very hard, but if we can just get as much information circulated as soon as possible, because, you know, we've got some millions of dollars worth of renewals projects that could sit alongside some really good new infrastructure projects that will need to get brought through the RLTP, for example. So can you see what you can do with the infrastructure providers in the CCO space to ensure that we can get some information circulated as soon as possible to inform this discussion?
Yes, well, after this and see what we can get out there, Councillor Newman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions. I'll mention them both now. Do the contractors have any ability to submit into this process directly, or does it kind of get sieved through us? And the second question is, at what will be the response level when the construction industry can carry out these projects? Will it be down to a level, 2, 3, or 1? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the second question here. The answer to the first one is, my understanding is yes, they can do that. Just repeat the second question.
Sure, Barry. What will be the response? What will the response level need to be at for the construction industry to actually start to carry out these projects? I.e., does it have to drop to a level 2 or 3 or 1? Because it could be a rate determining step. That was all. Do we know? Or?
No, in terms of the size of the construction companies this is aimed at, that's unclear, and I think it's just identifying projects that can get underway as soon as possible. The feedback I've had from the construction sector is that unless they can get work going pretty quickly, or unless things can change, there's quite serious consequences for the infrastructure construction sector.
I think it's Megan here, just to add to that as well. That will ultimately be a government decision about at what level things can start again.
Yeah, I think what we've got to remember is the criteria that will apply here is not our criteria, but their criteria, and that's the criteria that we most need to fit in, and we need to make sure we have a sufficient number of projects, that it's not a case of saying, well, we gave you everything you wanted, you didn't ask for any more, and therefore, you might not be getting your share of the cake. Our goal should be to get our share of the cake for Auckland, third of the country's population, 38% of the GDP. But we need to make sure that what we are providing certainly is not half-baked, certainly not a bridge to nowhere. I've got an idea where that bridge comment came from, but that are real projects that will make a real difference, leave a legacy for the city, and will achieve those objectives quite quickly. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, that's quite a good comment for me to ask my question, because I can't understand why our first priority isn't to bring forward our work programs. And if the in the infrastructure space. And if the criteria is 10 million and some of that work program is projects less than that, why we aren't automatically, before we come in with some extra stuff, bundling those up into packages so they do exceed the sort of $10 million threshold. For me, that would be the absolute number one. I don't understand why we're not doing that work first. Megan?
I think take that on board, and that's something we'll be looking at when we pull the programs together over the next few days.
You see my point, though. We can come up with a whole lot of things, but actually we've already got a work program. We've already got a series of things that we want to achieve, and some of which we've been able to fund and some of which we haven't. We should prioritise those first before we dream up a whole lot of new stuff. That's just where I was coming from. My second question is around trying to get the one dig policy. What are we doing about, because, we've got a huge amount of water care, healthy waters, we've got a water quality targeted rates, that's a lot of below the ground stuff. We're well behind that. Surely that should be a prioritisation. And then how are we working with things like Vector and power companies to try and get these big projects one dig so people don't, if we are going to put some serious investment, that we're not, doing something, closing it all down only for the power companies to come back 5 minutes later and do their thing.
So that'd certainly be part of the process, and projects that we're looking at the moment include speeding up things like water sewer separation projects water care have in place. The dig once, I think we've made good the last couple of years, but that's certainly part of how we do these things all, and that of course scales up the project to a larger size.
So, Your Worship, are we able to get that forward work program sort of thing first, or do you still want us to put through our own projects?
Well, officials, I think, very clearly are going to be looking at, if we're looking at things that are already consented, but we might not have the funding for. I think that's how Barry started off his presentation. I think one of the examples I used in my comment the other day for Councillor Sayers was the Matakana Link program, where everything's ready to go, but we're not quite sure because of the impact on council revenue whether we can meet our share of the bargain because of COVID-19. So those sort of projects, I think, are certainly among the projects we may be looking at. And from my discussions with Shane Ellison, that's certainly what he's looking at. And, we're not starting from scratch on this. So projects that we did have that were further back in ATAP, for example, that could be brought forward, they might meet that definition. And that might include the renewals. So let's have a look at that one.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stewart. Councillor, have we got you on the line there? Otherwise, I'll...
Have you got me?
Yes, I've got you now. Sharon, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Well, thanks, Barry. That's really good. I'm really looking forward to looking at the list. I think what you hit on before, you said it's something we have to create employment, and I think whatever we're going to do, $10 million isn't a lot of money, but I think we need to create employment, and I think that's the thing that we should be really considering.
Thank you.
And looking forward to the list.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Taipere.
Oh, kia ora, Your Worship. No questions at the moment. I just do support, however, Councillor Hill's comments around panel diversity. Thank you.
Yep. Unfortunately, we don't constitute the panel. The central government does, so that's a little out of our control. Councillor Walker.
Sure. Thanks, Phil. Just like to endorse the comments that Pippa and some others have made around things that go to the looming climate crisis. The other comment I'd make is as much as the government may be focused on big projects, we know that most of the businesses in Auckland are small businesses, and many of the projects are smaller projects that we can get happening quickly. So by all means, let's feed in, but let's give the government a bit of a snapshot of some other stuff. The other comment that I'd make in terms of criteria is quite obviously over the coming months, we're not going to have so much transport activity around Auckland. So there's a good opportunity to pick up things that might otherwise be quite disruptive, and I'm thinking of things in the central city area, so that when we come out, we're not facing so much ongoing disruption there.
Yeah, thank you for that point, Councillor. Councillor Watson?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess for me, I'd just state the obvious, in that I think this sort of exercise is very difficult when we don't know what sort of hand we're going to be dealt with the COVID-19.
Yeah.
So, and that goes to Desley Simpson's comments about a whole raft of projects, infrastructure projects, which have been through the ringer and which, you know, might be under threat, and, you know, when we actually do come out of that. So far from jumping into a swag of whole new stuff, there might be stuff that we want to get done, but is you know, challenged by our financial situation. So I'd make that point first of all. My question, which I'd look for clarification through Barry from the government, is what is their infrastructure strategy to these big projects that they have already approved, that they have signalled that you know, that they're looking to bring on as fast as they can anyway. So are they making it very explicit to us what projects you know, that they've already ostensibly approved, that they're looking to start, you know, next year anyway, with the likes of Penlink? Are they going to spell out very clearly what their strategy is for those projects in terms of timing?
I'll try and answer that. They may do at the moment on a very specific set of opportunities. So it's not broad. They have an overarching strategy. This is about projects that deliver benefits quickly and get people back into the workforce. So it's quite specific what they're aiming for here.
And they have said, Councillor, that these projects are on top of the upgrade infrastructure program that they announced 2 months ago. So I think it is something that will have a fairly instant effect. That's the critical thing that they're looking at. Okay, Councillor Young.
No question, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Look, we'll go back in the reverse order for comments. Probably there won't be a lot of comments at this point, so please.
Well, Mayor, Chris Darby here. Can I just ask another question of Barry, please?
Yeah, sure.
Barry, there were two parts to the letter from the chair of the infrastructure group, Mr. Binns. The second part intrigued me as well. The first primary question was about the construction-ready projects, but there was a second question in there about identifying changes required to existing laws and processes to overcome obstacles to project starts. So has that been conveyed to us clearly, that there's an invitation for Auckland Council to feedback on what we might need to change in terms of our planning rules or regulatory processes?
Kia ora, Chris, Megan here. Yes, it has. And there's actually, as you unsurprisingly, there are a number of ministries doing all sorts of work in this area. The Ministry for the Environment is leading some work, as well as other ministries like the DIA. So we are aware of that. We have, as staff, had the opportunity to consider whether we think there's any legislative changes that could assist. But also, yeah, happy to answer any other questions on that. All we've been asked is what opportunities we think there might be.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Look, we'll have an offline discussion about that then. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a brief discussion, a call from the Minister for the Environment this morning, and the sense that I got from him was that this will link in with the resource management review, and what they want to do is they want the projects, but they want to know that our systems for processing those projects are fit for purpose and best practice. So I think that's where that's coming from. Okay, just coming back to comments, again, if you feel the need to make them. Councillor Young?
No comment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Watson?
Of a crisis that is of an indeterminate length. I understand the rationale, but I just think from our perspective, we have to be quite clear and considered in what we put up, because coming down the line, there might be greater needs.
Thank you. Councillor Walker. Mic on, please, Councillor.
No comment.
Thank you. Chair Taipere.
No comment, Your Worship.
Councillor Stewart.
No comment.
Councillor Simpson.
No comment.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Worship. No comment.
Councillor Newman.
No comment.
Councillor Mulholland.
No comments.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, I do have a comment. Yeah, this is will be transformational. This is what is going to bring people and help bring people out of what is the lowest of lows we've probably, ever feel in my lifetime. So I think, my comments around diversity, I know we don't have control over that, but I think we should be giving feedback on that. Having no Māori and no woman in that room making those decisions about the future of what our communities look like is hugely concerning to me. The other things, if we pick things that are out of sync, and as many have said, we should be pushing forward our current work program, whether it's water, whether it's public transport, whether it's walking and cycling. If we have a long time of unemployment, people are going to be using our communities completely differently. We've already seen that with the walking and cycling happening in our own communities at the moment. I just think we need to be strong on what we want out of this and what we want to see right across our community. I do have concerns we're just going to stick in some roads and not really think about the long-term plan, because there is going to be significant downturn in immigration if we have immigration anytime soon. The growth we'll be expecting will be coming from other areas. I do think we should be putting forward things that aren't technically shovel-ready off the book right now, because there will be lots of designers, architects, draftspeople, whatever, who are willing to do quick work and get things. It can't just be about the big companies getting their big projects, which are in the pipeline anyway. So it's I think we have to have a diverse look at what our projects are within the community space, environment space. I think we need to be looking creatively. I'll be thinking about that too. So I'm not trying to be over extreme about this, but we can get this right, and we can make this something that is for everyone in our community, or we could end up with just doing the same things for an economy that is probably going to look completely different. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to let everyone know that Councillor Cooper and I will be very strong in how we see things, and you look forward to our colleagues' support on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Henare.
Oh, yeah, Your Worship, just I suppose a comment about not so much what projects and things, but where does the idea sit of remember we used to have council works department and that, where does that idea sit in this, or ideas of, say, I don't know, Ministry of Works, blah 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 blah, but under a council regime?
I have seen speculation on that, Toe, but I don't know any of us can comment on what might be in the government's mind at the moment. I can't. Yeah,
no, just putting it out there. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. No,
thank you.
Did note it. Thank you. Councillor Fletcher.
No, it's all been said.
Thank you. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, just firstly, you mentioned earlier around the equity issue, so that is going to be key in regard to these projects. I have no doubt at all that the southern councillors will be, again, also like the western counterparts, pushing for those projects that will actually deliver the equity. Councillor Collins ended up mentioning the local board, so a process that we are moving forward and sharing that with the local boards are going to be key, and the key in the fact that I think from our perspective is that they're on the journey with us in regard to these projects. So look, I look forward to it. I look forward to the projects that are going to come to the emergency committee for us to make a decision on, and especially those, I think, that it's been mentioned around the NZTA subsidy and delivery of them. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, and it's a good point that if councillors can liaise with their local board chairs, because you've had the fuller briefing on this, that would be very helpful. And, you know, the projects we put forward, I think either way, we'll still have something of a smorgasbord of projects that the government will ultimately be able to choose between. The message that I've got from ministers, plural, is better to have too much than too little, but that really depends on our ability as our officers have the time to actually develop the projects so that they are fully baked. Councillor Darby, any further comment?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just briefly, there's been some really good points raised in the questions that have been put to Barry. And I probably want to go back to a point that a number have made. Councillor Simpson, thank you. Reminding us that we actually do have a baseline program, and that should be where we first look. I want to politely put that this is not a pick and mix opportunity. If we approach it that way, it'll be disarray, and the government will ignore that pick and mix opportunity. It has to be well founded. And I think our criteria overlaid with the government criteria will make it a powerful package. We've got a number of plans in places and work programs galore that we need to first look at. And I stress that this is not about quantity, this is about quality and long-lasting, enduring projects that are going to meet, as I've said before and others have outlined, a very different future. So some things may not be as relevant as we once thought they were. I'm keen to see some of those smaller projects bundled up, those under $10 million projects, so that they can meet that $10 million threshold. I would hope that we can stimulate the construction sector where there's small operators that are likely to stimulate those very local communities and not just the big boy operators, the big boy construction companies. We need to make sure we leverage multiple benefits here. It's just not economic benefits. The document clearly outlines that there is an expectation of clear public benefit, social benefit, and our people expect that of us. Look, lastly, I would hope that our chief economist is in the mix on this as well, because the contributions there would be quite valuable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dalton.
No, thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Cooper.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Councillor Coombe.
Thank you. I would like to endorse the comments that have already been made, and it's great to hear that there's seems to be an alignment of thinking in terms of the approach that's needed and the fact that we need to actually have our own Auckland Council criteria, even if that takes it, raises the bar above what the government's put out. So I'd like to endorse those comments, and also what you said, Mr. Mayor, in terms of creating a legacy for the city that's inclusive of all Aucklanders, and that everybody will benefit. So thank you to Barry for the update. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a few comments. I wanted to reiterate and endorse the comments that have been made about the equity, social lens, climate lens overlay that we apply to any of our projects. I think one of the challenges we face is we're all going to be in a new space, an evolving space when we come out of lockdown and when we're ready to go ahead with these projects. And it's getting ourselves to think as to what that new space might look like, might be for our community, and what the projects are that are going to fit into allowing that new space to be created. So I think that's where I'm challenged with my thinking, and I know that Chair Lawton Foley and has already sent emails that has got Councillor Filipina and myself thinking about how that new space might look and what the projects might be for that new space once we come out of lockdown. I'm heading into a meeting with Panuku Monday afternoon, and I think it's just important that people are aware of that. Obviously, they'll be thinking about what some of their projects are, and I'll be interested to see where they're coming from. And just finally, I know we're trying to be as quick and efficient as possible, but I'm always challenged by shovel-ready timelines. And so when the announcement was made, and I saw it yesterday, I thought, this is great. But I think it's important that we're given a bit of space just to allow people to think, to reflect on the baseline projects we have at the moment and what the new space would look like. And just finally, I have to endorse the words of Councillor Hills just around the diversity level of this panel. I know that that's not our panel, it's a government panel, but I think we should be feeding into those ministers some feedback as to how our nation is going to be different. Our society will be very different, but we can't just keep depending on the same types of panels to make these kinds of decisions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Endorse the comments of Thursday Simpson. We've done a lot of work already around prioritisation of projects through ATAP, through our community facilities work program and our asset renewals program. So we need to use that, have some intuitive ways where we bundle projects up to actually present them in an attractive package to the crowd. And perhaps there are going to be some new thinking projects out there that we haven't actually looked at with any depth until this point in time and take this opportunity up. So I think we have a good opportunity, Mr. Mayor, and we need to headline it with our criteria as well as the government. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Casey.
Hi, Phil. I agree with everybody else that the government needs to solve that diversity data and maybe make a few urgent additions to the panel. We could help with some suggestions for that. And I'll be talking with Harry Doig and Pookie Tapapa and Margie Watson and Albert Eden with regard to the infrastructure projects, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bartley.
I don't have any comments, sorry.
Thank you. Look, that's been really useful, I think, to our officers here. The key theme coming through on this is if these are things that are going to get off the ground very quickly, they're not going to be new and totally different concepts. They're going to be things that we've done work on already, and I think that's important because to answer the specifics of the criteria that they've met, we need to show that these have been thought through and that the projects are ready to go and will have the stimulus and multiplier effect. I take on board, and I think our officers will, the importance of the environmental and the social aspects of the impact of these projects. We need the projects to be worthwhile. If they're not worthwhile, they won't be there. They need to be projects that are important to us, will have a legacy for us, and will have additionally the effect of a stimulus and a job creation outcome that will be desperately necessary at the time that we face it. We are living in a different world, but one of the things about that different world is that, you know, we've cruised along thinking we've got a relatively low level of unemployment, isn't that great? That's not going to be what the future world looks like, and it will be about how we can use the skills of our people usefully rather than casting them on the scrap heap. So that job creation aspect, and there will be a mixture of skills required in it, is vitally necessary. Okay, look, we've got, I'll move and ask somebody to second that we receive the verbal update.
I'll second, thanks.
Summary, Deputy Mayor seconded, and that also the other recommendation that we note the response by the Council to COVID-19. I don't think I need a division vote on that. If I just do it by voices, if I can. Those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary. Great, thank you. That's very clear. Look, I think we've only got one item left on the agenda. It should be reasonably straightforward. I know that jinxes any suggestion of it being dealt with quickly, but I will move that we exclude public and any staff not necessary for the discussion of this item online. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Seconded by Councillor Dalton, I think. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. Carried. And if we can just take 2 minutes so that we can then move into exclusion and guarantee that. But with the permission of the councillors, we'll just deal with this last item under confidential rather than having a half-hour break. So unless somebody objects fundamentally to that.